for 6 months too. We don't really know, but the bottom line is, yeah, I mean, I would be highly suspicious of the idea that it's already bottoming here. We need to see more pain, unfortunately, in any market, including the Nasdaq. By the way, the equity markets. And basically what we got on Bitcoin is, just kind of bouncing off this recent panic low. And we know that UST, the stable coin backed by Terra Luna, that had the collapse that caused this big sell off here, kind of a panic in Bitcoin. But the beauty of this is, and this is where the charts really show themselves to be so beneficial. If you take a channel, right, and we connect a few of these major highs here. So let's do that right here. So you can see, again, connecting this high with this one here right through, and you just stretch that line down. Look at what we get. We get that low pivot right there. So that's where I bought a little Bitcoin just to trade, just looking to get out in, maybe 33, 35, maybe 38,000 as a high pivot. But that is the technical level right now. And again, working beautifully, as you can see this trend line, just holding price. I still think Bitcoin has further downside to go, but in the near term, it is at support. I do think that it will have a bounce back a little bit higher. And yeah, it's been fun right now. So the one key trend line I've been watching here for myself, it was a former channel that we had. So I think the last time we were on, we talked about this one, where if you basically connect these lows and these highs here, and this was that bearish pattern when we had this big fall down here, and then we chopped sideways, which told us the probabilities where we were going to break down. Yeah. And so basically, if we retrace, which is right around 38, it should bring us right back into that level. Now, if you get above that, that's where I would start to say, okay, now you're back in this channel. The bearish pattern, the bearish breakdown has failed. But again, for me, probably that 38,000 would be your max upside before I would start to get bullish. Above that, yeah, I think you have to get a little bit more bullish on it. So I would say, definitely since 38,000 is that trend line, if you got above that psychological 40,000, that even number, that's where you would start to say, okay, now we have, and assuming this is holding, right? So, I mean, you could peak above it. We've seen charts do that all the time. But let's say we stay above there for a week, 2 weeks. Now you got something cooking. I mean, there's definitely something that I would start to look for. I'd start to look for a bull flag development and further upside. And then if you do head up, the beauty of it is you have a couple levels to look at here. Number one would be this one here, which is around 44, 45,000. And then this one again up here, which is now about 51,000. That would be the next two levels of resistance. But right now, let's be clear, folks. Right now, the bearer chart is fully, in control. We did hit support, so you expect a bear market rally. But until proven otherwise, this is a bear market, bear winter, whatever you want to call it. That's what it is for now. The altcoins probably get a bounce as well. I think what's important here, and this is the chart of Ethereum, we can take a quick look at that, but you had this key level right here, which really was the low, right? So really amazing how this pivot, like right here with this one, and that's exactly where you came down to it. So I'm kind of in the camp that I think most things are going to follow Bitcoin. Bitcoin ultimately follows the NASDAQ. So the NASDAQ, if we get some continued upside in the tech sector, that can move up. And I think, again, you're going to look for some resistance on Ethereum, this low area kind of right here, which is around 2,500. And then maybe we can retrace into this area. And then same thing, just like with Bitcoin, if you start trading above this area and above this downsloping trend line, that's where you would enter that new bull market and where you could say, okay, there's something new cooking here. So realistically, if we look at that 20,000, which was the high from 2017 back here, that would be that kind of high end. And let's be fair. I mean, just a couple nights ago, we hit 25,000. So, I mean, we're getting real close to that high end target. I think as a technician, you have to look at all angles. So you have to say, okay, well, there's a possibility that 20 doesn't get hit. Maybe we won't come down to 20. But there's also a chance that we could go through 20 if there's extreme panic, if there's an extreme kind of reset. And the question is then, well, how low could we go? And to do that, one of the metrics that I came up with is what's called a measured move technique. So you take the high here at 69 to this low, and you basically notice that was a pretty much a straight shot down. Right. So that's a straight shot down there. Then you take the highest point on the consolidation bounce and you drop that another equal distance. And what you'll find is if you do a measured move, so this length to this length, you get a $12,000 price target, which would be my max downside target. Now, the reason why that has some validity aside from just measured move is because every bear cycle or winter that we've had prior in Bitcoin has dropped Bitcoin 80 to 85%. Well, if you take 85% from this high of 69,000, you basically get 12,000. So this would be a repeat of past cycles. Again, I don't know if that'll be hit, but that would be kind of my worst case scenario. I think the bottom line is you have to go with what the chart's showing us, right? And right now we have a chart that has an M top with a double top over here. I'm not sure what I said before in terms of that, but basically what you might be referring to is if you don't necessarily reach your max extension to the upside, maybe you don't reach your max extension to the downside. So there is that theory, that kind of contemplating theory. My kind of counter trend to that would be that for me, we got down to 25,000 so far on Bitcoin, and you still haven't seen massive destruction in cryptos, right? So we did see the UST collapse. We saw Terra Luna collapse, but you still have, tens of thousands of Bitcoin or tens of thousands of cryptocurrencies that still have value. And if there's one thing I know about these type of market bubbles is that you have to see more of those go out of business. I still think Bitcoin survives and thrives. I still think Ethereum does. A lot of these best of breed ones will. But yes, we started to see the blood in the streets with Terra Luna UST, but we need to see more of that. And the question is, how low does Bitcoin have to go and drag the whole crypto sector for us to really see that occur? And again, from the ashes of that will rise awesomeness, right? Great things with crypto and blockchain and everything, but we got to see that at this point. And again, it's hard to imagine that the low of 25 could be that low yet, considering you still have so many things out there that are still functional as in cryptocurrencies. Start of November. So it does make it 6 months longer than if you did it from over here about. But yeah, you really have to take from the highest pivot. That was the explosive irrational exuberance of the ETF launching that was the futures of Bitcoin and things like that. So I think you would take it from there. And then the question is, okay, well, past cycles we've seen 12 to 18 months until we finally bottomed out and started turning back around. So we're well over 6 months, I believe, at this point, or about 6 months in. That could leave basically 6 to 12 months more of rough markets. Now, remember, it could bottom and just kind of chop sideways for 6 months too. We don't really know, but the bottom line is, yeah, I would be highly suspicious of the idea that it's already bottoming here. We need to see more pain, unfortunately, in any market, including the NASDAQ, by the way. The equity markets, They're getting a bounce these last few days. This is just a bear market bounce, frankly. Your 2013, 2014 move. And you can see this was a pretty crazy move here on Bitcoin too, right? Yeah. Where you had basically a $15, $14 handle on it. You ran all the way up to 250. You then corrected down to 42. And then you had this mega run to about 1,300, right? Or 1,100, 1,200. So yeah, it's interesting to see that how you had this big pop blow off here and then you consolidated before your next move. Is it possible that could happen? Anything is possible at this point. So that's something you should keep an eye on for sure. Again, gold to me is doing exactly what it should do. I think we even talked about this last time I was on 3 or 4 weeks ago. We talked about how you had the breakout, but you needed to come back and retest what we call the scene of the crime, the breakout trend line. And it did. It couldn't have done it any better than this. And it went right into that level. So beautiful little hit right there. I do think that gold starts to make its way back up here. I also think you have to put gold in perspective. So number one, it's positive for the year, not up much. But if you compare it to what Bitcoin's done this year or what the stock market, people would be loving being in gold all year right now, right? And then the other side of the coin is think about what the dollar has done. So usually when the dollar rallies, gold goes down. Yes. But look at look at the rally we've seen in the dollar. And then think about how well gold has performed in spite of that. That's very, very unusual. And what it tells us is that if the dollar really continues to pull back here, gold should be pushed up just by that means alone. Stocks, I went long just over the last week, just for a trade, but you can see again why I did that. This is that long-term trend. It goes all the way back to 2009. The markets were in this range for the longest time. We then had the COVID surge, right? The collapse, and then the stimulus from the government and from the Fed. The massive stimulus put this market on steroids. And then look at where you bounced. Literally right back to that upper line right there. That tells you that the probabilities favor a bounce. How high does it go? I don't think it goes that high, frankly. Like if I'm looking at the chart here, you have a pivot low right here, which would be my first level, which we're very close to. And then you have a secondary pivot right there. So, we're actually getting close to potential target here on the markets. But again, then I think you have to come back in this range at the very least. My longer term target by year end is actually all the way down here, which is the pre-COVID highs. So I think, again, if you think about everything getting sucked out of the market liquidity wise by the Fed, government's not passing any new bills here. They're not doing more checks to Americans. So you have to think that eventually the economy is going to weaken and you're going to see this market continue to come in. There are a few stocks that I will throw out. Actually, there's one in particular that I'm keeping a close eye on that's not necessarily a short-term trade. It's maybe over the next couple weeks or I should say the next 6 to 12 months. And that would be this chart here, which is Warner Brothers Discovery. They just merged HBO Max and Discovery. And the reason why I'm intrigued by this is, number one, the stock has been hammered down here. We just heard Warren Buffett took a huge position in Paramount, which is popping Paramount by like 15+%. And also later this year, the new Game of Thrones is coming out, right? So you figure that people will start to get excited as that comes closer. This is a stock that is very, very inexpensive relative to its peers at this point, with a relative good cash generation. And so again, these are the types of things I try to think outside of the box. I'm not going to go to trusty Apple. I think Apple's still overpriced. I'm thinking of stocks that aren't on the radar that have some catalysts later this year that could keep them up and maybe make them into good plays. On the other side of the coin, I think like stocks like like a Zoom, something that's been beaten down so badly. Yes, it could go lower, but you're getting to levels now where you start to say, all right, well, maybe I'd commit 100,000, but let me start with 25,000 here. And if it goes 10% lower, I'll add another 25,000 and kind of accumulate some of these names down here, because they have been decimated. They've gone through their own .com collapse style drop. And I think, again, at some point, these start to make sense at these levels. Yeah, so you're right. You had this kind of wedge pattern right here, and it did break down just as Bitcoin was breaking down. It's amazing because if you look at Bitcoin's chart, Solana, Avalanche, they all broke down at the same time. They all had a major trend line that they broke. What's interesting about XRP is it hit this technical level here, and so far you are bouncing. Now, the question is, do you have enough energy in it? Can it get back to this line at around 57 cents? That's going to be first big resistance. And then really, if you're into XRP, you want it to take out this trend line, this downsloping one here. You need to see it start trading above that. Till then, you have to be very, very careful, in my opinion, because again, the crypto markets are scary right now. There's a lot of question marks. I honestly don't know what this judge's decision is going to be. It could be the greatest thing, or it could just be a negative for it. So be careful. But right now, you are bouncing off support. You got to recapture some of these levels for it to become more bullish. Like you, I did invest in this. So when I was looking at the charts, it was collapsing down. I entered in the $40-ish range thinking, okay, well, it's down. It was into technical support. So I was using my chart know-how. I ended up averaging in once. I accumulated a 5% position in the portfolio. And then at that point, I was willing to go, by the way, to 12% of my portfolio, because based on the market cap, I always structure how much I'm going to invest by, like, Bitcoin's going to be the biggest in my portfolio because it's the most stable, right? Ethereum second. And Terra Luna is kind of in that kind of third tier. So I was willing to go up to 12% of my portfolio. At 5%, I said to myself, wait a minute. I started to hear what was going on. I said, all right, I'm going to hold it. You never know. Maybe it bounces. Maybe they get straighten this out, but I'm not going to invest anything more. And thank goodness I didn't, because I basically lost it all.